Hey guys, real quick before you get into the video, I just wanted to let you know that I broke up this video into DIY first and then professional installation second. And when I speak about locks, I'm speaking about both Microlocs and SISTERLOCKS kind of at the same time. This video also has chapters, so if you're only interested in professional installation and you don't care about DIY, you can feel free to skip to that portion. I really hope this video was very useful to you guys. If it is, if you don't mind liking, subscribing, and or sharing my video, I would really appreciate it. On to the video. Hey guys, it's Tanya. Welcome back to my channel. As you can see, today I am in my car. I just thought it might be nice to have a little change of scenery, and it's a super nice day outside. What that means is that there will be maybe some background noise of whatever that is that's chirping or any cars that are passing by. So if this isn't working, I will maybe not do it again. But today's video actually is a question that I've been getting asked like a lot, and I've been seeing a lot in a lot of the Facebook groups that I'm in, and it's about like how much do SISTERLOCKS or Microlocs cost. And I've given it a lot of thought, and I actually have some notes written down here, and I'm going to give you guys my perspective on what a person should be considering if they want to get Microlocs or they want to get SISTERLOCKS. And there's two different camps. There is the DIY camp, and then there is the professional camp. Each of those has pros and cons. The three things that it's going to come down to is time, money, trust, and I guess you could even put a fourth one in there, and you could say time, money, trust, and skill. So those are the four things I would consider when you're looking at the cost. So for example, let's start with DIY. The advantages of DIY is that DIY and Microlocs means that you get to save a significant amount of money. What do you need? You need a mirror, you need a interlocking tool, which I have one listed in the description, and you need water. With all those things, you can do your Microlocs. Normally people would choose to do those in like a braid or a 2-strand twist, or even like I've seen some palm rolled Microlocs in order to make it easier on the person who's installing it themselves. But you could also use an interlocking tool to do your Microlocs. You can vary them in size, so there is no standard. It's just going to be up to you. Your cost in that instance is going to be your time more than it's going to be your money, because the expense isn't really in the materials. It's just going to take you, I've heard a few days, I've heard a few weeks, depending on your patience, how much time you have to invest into it. That's where the skill comes in. There is a lot of precision if you want your grid to be looking good. So in that instance with your DIY, you have the disadvantages of it takes a lot of time. It requires you to at least have some type of skill behind you, and you're going to need to decide what method that you want to use and pretty much stick with that method throughout the process of your installation. But on the other end of it, you end up not having a lot of expense, so that's an advantage for you, though you would need some skill because you don't want to end up with a jacked up grid. Or if you don't care, then you don't care, and you don't have to worry about having precision with your grid. The second part I think a lot of people forget about when it comes to Microlocs and SISTERLOCKS in general is the maintenance. So as your hair grows out, the new growth is going to have to be retied, retwisted, and back into the rest of the lock. You can't, or they'll marry together. You end up with matted hair and stuff at the root. In addition to having that initial installation cost of your time, you're going to need to invest time in doing retwists or reties. I've seen some people who maybe start their locks off with braids or interlocks, and then they just start retwisting the roots because it's quicker. But either way, it's going to take time. I've also seen the method where people just they interlock as they go along. So say like this, every time they take a shower, when they get out, they interlock, one little section of their hair. But you're going to continuously be having to be keeping up with making sure that your hair and your roots don't go too long without being reincorporated back into the lock. There's so many resources on YouTube of people who are DIYing their hair, and you can be very successful with it. You can go the other route, which is the route I went. This is a route I think where people do their research and they start looking at prices, and they're like, what in the actual heck are they asking this much money for? But you have to think about it. The variation of Microloc cost by a professional is going to start with the easiest and lowest amount of time for them to install is going to be the cheapest for you. The most time consuming and complicated way of installation is going to be more expensive to you. And I would assume that for the most part, SISTERLOCKS, unless it's done by a trainee, is going to be more expensive than Microlocs. That being said, for example, if you have somebody doing your Microlocs who's been doing it longer, they might cost more than a SISTERLOCK trainee who hasn't been doing it that long. There is a lot of variation. I'm going to put up on the screen, for example, a person locally to my area, and how people usually charge for SISTERLOCKS is they have a base and then they increase by length. So they have a set and then they increase by length of your hair. It can also go up if your hair is extra thick. or if it's difficult to lock because it's really, really straight as well. So there's variations in what they're going to charge you person by person and even city by city. Okay, so for example, I have Microlocs. They're done similar to SISTERLOCKS. The description on her website actually says Microlocs done similar to the way in the look of SISTERLOCKS. My locks installation was based on a set base price, I think, of $600, and then it increased by a certain increment depending on the length of your hair. I believe that the $600 was for 8 inches of hair, and I ended up having 12, and it increased by 50 per extra inch, so I ended up paying $800, and it would increase based on the thickness of my hair as well. But this is the kicker, guys, and I feel like this is where people start getting confused. So after you have your hair installed, you're still gonna have additional expense in your reties, and it's still gonna be additional time in your reties. So for example, I go get my hair retied every 4 to 6 weeks, and she charges $30 an hour. On average, it takes about 4.5 hours. At one point when I went too long because I couldn't get an appointment, I ended up paying a little bit extra, maybe $150 instead of the normal like $140 or so. And then the very last time that I went, it actually only took 4 hours, and so I only ended up paying $120. But that expense is gonna be pretty much monthly or every month and a half, because you have to get your hair retightened as you go along. I'm gonna do the math of my installation up until now of the money that I've spent on my hair. Like, I guess I'm saying this because I think that even in my own mind, you don't like look into the future necessarily and think to yourself like, okay, every $140, how much am I spending a year on my hair, and do I want to make that type of commitment? Not only just the money, but the time. I know that at least 1 time per month I need to have a block of 4 hours during which I might have to get a babysitter or something along those lines to go and sit and get my hair retied, but not everybody's going to want to do that. Now, you do have the alternative. For example, if you are a SISTERLOCK installee, to take the class to do your own reties, and they teach you how to do that. And I believe the class is I'll put a link in the description to a video of I can't remember her name right at this moment. Oh my gosh, if you're watching, forgive me, but I'm going to put a link in the description to her video, and she talks about the class to train you to do how you do your own reties. If you end up with Microlocs though, you can start DIYing at some point. If you don't want to keep going to somebody else, you can learn how to do it, and you can start DIYing. Based on that number that I just talked about a few minutes ago, think about what your investment is going to be over time. It's not just the installation. You still have to have a few hours worth of visits every certain interval, and that's going to be an additional expense that you're going to need to cover. The other thing that I would say that is part of the investment in getting Microlocs and SISTERLOCKS done by a professional is trust. I've seen a lot of instances, for example, in my own loctician, where she started out with 400 and something locks, and then all of a sudden she only has like 380 because they've been getting married together and combined over time, and that person didn't even tell her. And it was to her advantage to combine them because now she has less locks to do, but she put her trust in that person. And it's not just her. I've heard of other people and that's happened to them, and they question like, should a person be telling me if they're going to be combining my locks? And I think that they should, even if it's necessary. So one of your like investments, I guess, in using a loctician is going to be that you're going to have to trust them to do the right thing and to explain to you what's going on. Fixing locks is another expense. So some people charge to fix locks and some people don't. So my loctician doesn't charge to fix locks, but if it takes her longer because she's fixing locks, then of course it will come back on me on her hourly price. So sometimes with locticians, you end up paying per fixed lock. So you pay for the $150 say for the retighten that day, but if they for maybe $5 for every lock that they have to fix that maybe has slippage or something that is wrong with it, and that goes into your total price of what your retie would be. When you're considering the cost, when you're deciding if you want to get SISTERLOCKS or if you want to get Microlocs, and you're trying to decide if you want to DIY and you want to have a loctician do it, the DIY option is great, but you're going to need time, maybe not as much money, and you're going to need skill. But if you go the professional route, you're going to need much more money. Even if you get them palm rolled, or if you get braids or twists, that's a little bit less expensive. Interlocked for sure is going to be on the more expensive end, especially if they're smaller. You're going to need to trust that person who is taking care of your hair, and you're also going to need time as well because you're going to have to sit there for your retightens. I really hope this video is helpful to you guys. Sometimes I think that when you're doing your research, it's kind of hard to find a clear answer on like, what is this going to cost me? I can only say that to me, it's totally has been worth it. And I made a really big investment in my Microlocs. I think that they're beautiful. I have found a hair freedom that I didn't have before, and I'm really happy that I chose not to DIY because I do not have the skill set or the patience or time to do that. I hope this video helped you guys. If you have any further questions about finding a loctician, deciding if you want to do interlocking versus braids or any of those other things, don't forget that I'm having my loctician come on to answer any questions that anybody might have. She'll be on, I guess, in November, so I'm just compiling all the questions that people have so she can come on and do a Q&A. So if you have any questions, leave them below. I would appreciate if this video helped you, that you would like it. It's really good for the algorithm, and it helps more people see videos that you found useful, and especially when you subscribe. So until next time, guys, bye mamas.